Hey everybody, Dia Davidson here with another conversation on race. This time we're talking about education, and we're talking K-12 as well as college and post-secondary, of course, institutions. Let's join now Dr. M. Christopher Brown II. He is the 18th president of Kentucky State University. Dr. Brown, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a
Oh,
great
it's
day.
my
It's good to be alive.
Yes, especially in this era of COVID-19.
Oh,
Dr.
yeah.
Brown, let's talk a little bit about that and some of the successes and challenges that you've been facing over at KSU with this pandemic and getting your students not only virtually but also in person, and your faculty and your staff keeping everybody safe. How's that been going for you?
We have been fortunate. Compliance is extremely high. We had some misbehavior the first week. There was misbehavior the first week, and I, as I'm a former elementary educator, and so I may have switched back to in loco parentis and sent a very strongly worded message to the campus, much more in a principal role than a president role, and said, you know how they will take your chocolate milk or take your recess, and say, if we can't comply, then we'll just shut down operations and everyone can go home. And there has been extremely good compliance since then because no one wants to go home. What's so interesting is Kentucky State is, even in this pandemic, experiencing an increase in enrollment of our traditional first-time, full-time freshmen, of students returning, high retention rates. And that is the reality that many of the students that comprehensive institutions and historically Black colleges serve are often first-time, first-generation college students. We have a high degree of Pell eligible, which means low-income students. And for those students, the campus environment, even in the pandemic, is a safer living environment. It may be a more food secure living environment than even the communities from which they are arriving.
And I would even venture to say probably technologically
Oh,
more
absolutely.
secure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was amazing in the height of the depopulation of the campus back in March and April, that there were students, and we have a free laptop program for freshmen, but of course that's only 1 year in. This is only the second year of it. So we had students who in March and April had no laptop. And so we're saying everything is rolling online, but they had no laptop to get online, or they were in places that they did not have. They were using their telephone, their smart device, but they did not have internet. And so we actually we're so thankful for our foundation. We had to send laptops to some students, as well as these hotspots, they're called, that generate a Wi-Fi signal, so that they were able to complete their coursework.
Let's talk a little bit about that because, we've done stories recently of, elementary students who are having this issue, having to go and sit in the parking lot of their school in the state's second largest county schools here in Fayette County in order to be able to do their work and not do it on a cell phone. Are you, as an educator on the university level, are you concerned that this is going to, if this pandemic continues on and the learning continues on this way, going to create this dichotomy in not only access but in learning that may be irreparable?
Well, what we know, the data is clear, and if you read a book like Race, Class, and Schools by Richard Rothstein, there are fissures in our educational system in America, and those fault lines break out around race, ethnicity, They break out around income, and sometimes they break out around geography, whether you're urban or rural, and sometimes those lines intersect. And those are very dangerous places when there's an intersection of those lines. Now, on top of that, um, there has been uh, uh, a rumble beneath the fault lines with this pandemic that have widened the fissures and made those gaps greater. And those places where they intersect are now becoming sinkholes, right? So let's take your question, and there's a second piece I want to overlay really quickly what that looks like. So you are from a low income household with working class or working poor parents or a parent, and you're depending on school for your food security because you're free and reduced meal, maybe a Title I school. So you're eating breakfast at school, you're getting lunch at school, you're in the after school program where you're getting your snack, you're completing your homework. Now you are not accessing those healthy meals, which are good for your health. You do not have the Wi-Fi. So if you're a working class to low income home, you're working on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm trying to pay my rent, trying to pay my utilities, trying to put a little food on the table. Cable is a luxury, Wi-Fi is a luxury. I may be even taking public transportation, right? So now I'm not getting my meals at school. I never had the Wi-Fi at home because that's not something we can afford to have. And now we're supposed to learn at home, which is virtual learning at home. But my mother, my father is an essential worker. So they're not working from home. They're frontline, cleaning the hospital, doing maintenance work. And so these young people are home, sadly, in many cases, unsupervised, with limited access to technology, trying to scaffold academic content, math, reading, literacy, scientific concepts, social studies, history, and there's no adult supervision and certainly no trained teacher to help with students who may have learning challenges.
So then as parents, then there's going to be some level of guilt, but
Mm.
then what can we do um, if we don't have access? What can we do in order to make sure that our child isn't further left behind?
Yeah. This is, in some communities, this may be reminiscent of the sort of the Great Black Migration from the South to the North, where parents had to go to Chicago, Detroit, New York, New Jersey to find work. And they had to say to their aunt or their grandmother, I have to leave Robert, Mary, John, Paul in your care. I'm going to go work. I'm going to send the money back, but can you help me? I'm a part of some social groups, you know, in certainly in Black communities, there are fraternities and sororities that live lifelong. And so those are things that many social groups have been talking about. What can we do collectively to team in areas that are challenged, to say one of our fraternal members once or twice a week will go into that community and make themselves available for tutoring, enrichment, or academic support. And it's even as we envision it, it is challenged because the CDC guidelines of social distancing, and under traditional circumstances, we could do that at a church basement in the fellowship hall. We could do that at a community center or a recreational center, but you can't really amalgamate in groups of more than 10. And so as we think it through, providing supplemental support in communities who need additional academic support, we're challenged to find the space to even deliver the supports to those communities. Yeah, and then you'll have to figure out the notification mechanisms to the families for those communities.
Brown versus Board of Education. Did we ever really get the equality? Because it seems like it's cycling back again. We're talking about this inequality again. So for those who don't know about that legislation, that law, help explain that, but also help in context now, today, we're seeing still this separate, somewhat, and unequal.
Oh yeah, the there it's sort of like your grandmother's old grandfather clock that had the pendulum that would move back and forth, and so Brown v. Board of Education uh, sadly resulted in a bait and switch. So the original request from those families was equitable funding for the schools so that they didn't get the old textbooks. They wanted new textbooks. They wanted strong academic learning materials. They wanted high quality academic facilities or buildings for the education of those populations. The which was the desegregation question. Ultimately, the court never ruled on desegregation of the funding, the money. They ultimately decided to provide integration and said, well, instead of just giving more money or giving more better quality facilities or learning supplies, what we'll do is we'll let Black students sit by white students in the same place. And that will solve the problem. And so while they mixed the races in integration through busing, through rezoning and districting, there was never any attention to the intangibles of education. You know, and education is based on a lot of intangibles. And so we go back to, I keep going back to that book this morning, and believe it or not, Richard Rothstein's book. So depending on your household, the things to which you have exposure, even in your kitchen, is going to be different, you know? So a cup and saucer exist in some homes, you know, but a cup and plates exist in other homes. So when we're teaching the concept of a saucer and what a saucer does and what it looks like, for those who have seen it, touched it, and have one at home, that's a very clear frame of reference for it. For those who have not, they have to try to use what we call schema, building pieces to understand it. That's why the 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C. is so important, because for some families, they're going to go to Washington, D.C. at some point, regardless, but for other families, they're not. And so it's that experiential based learning. It is the fact that you've been to the museum, you've been to the Capitol, you've been to different places that give you a frame of reference. There's a wonderful movie about the power of experiential education that I think about all the time, Slumdog Millionaire, right? Slumdog Millionaire, this guy is from one of the most impoverished areas of India. He ultimately wins $1 million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, not because he has a bachelor's degree, a master's, or a PhD, but because his life experiences have put him in places for what we call serendipitous learning. And we have some communities that don't have access to serendipitous learning, and they're depending on our formal educational system to embed them with the content knowledge in math, in literacy, in linguistics and communication and civic history and participation, that's critically important. Uh, and this is an aside. Every child, every baby with the tabula rasa concept, all over the world is born linguistically neutral.
Mm-hmm.
You can take even a Black family from Alabama and Tennessee or Kentucky who are in the military stationed in Germany. They have a baby, a Black baby in Germany, an American child in Germany. That child, as a baby, will learn speaking German. Not because the parents speak German, not because they're taught German, but because they hear German and they absorb it. So the learning is serendipitous. They're going to be like, oh man, the baby, but that's what they have heard. That's what they've experienced, right? And so same in this nation with children who are bilingual from Latino or Hispanic homes. And so we have to make sure that for those populations in the Commonwealth who don't have access to serendipitous learning because they're in these fault lines in our educational system, that our school systems and our social civic support systems are putting in the extra effort to make sure that they are not intentionally left behind from benign neglect. There's some things we may not be able to fix, but we need to be at least attempting to put supports in for them. We're doing it here at Kentucky State, even at the college level. Even at the college level, we're still having to buy Wi-Fi, the hotspot things for some of our students who are learning virtually this semester and send it to them. We've had to mail laptops even this semester to some of our students. We've had to use the foundation to purchase some textbooks for some of our students who's, we have young people who are in homes right now whose parents have lost jobs since March. There was one case this year. I'm so thankful for our foundation and the work that Willie Peel and Don Lyons are doing there to raise scholarship money. We had one family where the balance to clear that student for this semester was $300. Which sounds negligible. So we sent out the form letter that we sent out to everybody that says, you owe the Commonwealth money. Please send us this money or you cannot be here. And the mother emails, and we get adults on the phone with her, and ultimately she's lost her job as a result of the pandemic. So while the $300 was not a problem last year, $300 is a mountain this year. These are real issues where the pandemic has added to pre-existing disruptions and exacerbated our ability to provide quality education from K-12 through college to many citizens of the Commonwealth. There are citizens right now who last semester had to drive to library parking lots, community college parking lots, university parking lots to access their Wi-Fi to be able to complete their work. That was not the case for everyone, but for some families, that was their reality.
And that one someone or two someones are still very important someones.
Oh yes, oh yes. And not to be differential, but what the value of education and a credential and a college degree or high school diploma will do for those people who are being forced to put extraordinary Herculean effort to get access to Wi-Fi is going to be transformative.
Yes.
It's going to be transformative.
Let's talk a little bit about integration of schools. Some say that harmed especially our Black male students because we lost the connectivity to the community where the teacher looked like the classroom. She lived, or he lived, in that community and knew the parents. And if Johnny and Susie misbehaved in class, not only was mom and dad going to know, but everybody in that community was going to collectively. Have we lost that with integration? Have we lost that important component to support our students? And do you see HBCUs as sort of the way that students who missed that connectivity can find that community, can find that support mechanism, and continues to make HBCUs a valuable commodity when young people are selecting their higher education?
Yeah, I think you're correct. It's a unique trend. I was fortunate to have been born out and developed at the last phase of desegregation, switching into integration. And so when I went to school, I had the same teachers that my uncle and aunts had, and almost like a year after they would retire. So I got the last of them, and across the street, 2 houses down, was a principal of the elementary school, and his best friend was the principal of the other school. And so I would see my principal, across the street, 2 doors down at his friend's house. My guidance counselor in middle school, and then she transferred eventually to the high school, was also the choir director at our church and my Sunday school teacher.
So you couldn't get away with anything, could you?
So the circles, the bus driver was a member of the church. So the prior to massive integration in housing, when housing was still segregated. So even though my grandmother was a domestic, and later worked in the laundry at the university, 2 doors down was a principal, and 4 doors down was an attorney, and 3 doors down that way was the funeral home director. So these were mixed class neighborhoods, even though they were racially based enclaves. They were our communities. That said, there are 3 organisms that are indigenous to the African American experience. There are 3. That is the Black family, the Black church, and the Black college. These are the 3 indigenous organisms. They are our own creations. They are defined out of the lived experience of that community. And those are places in that organism where that community can see themselves reflected and reproduced. And certainly this pandemic gave people time to think, reflect. The pandemic was injected with a secondary concern with the deaths of Ahmaud Marbury, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And so in the midst of the pandemic, as people are thinking and reflecting, there's this injection of questions about civic justice, racial equality, and humanity. What does it mean to be human? And what does it mean to be human in the American society? And how do we, as corporations, as businesses, as other entities, live out our creed that all men are created equal? And so what then happened is people began to ask that question and to ask themselves, where can I find safe harbor from these concerns? And so as a result, you saw several what we call 5-star athletes saying, I'm not going to go to a Power 5, I'm going to select an HBCU. You see corporations saying, you know, I want to do something about civic justice, racial equality, and I want to make a statement about humanity, that I believe that all men are created equal. And so you've seen corporations and individuals giving huge donations to HBCUs, because what has become clear is that with all the noise and with all the busyness that we call life, that there's this cohort of institutions, 100 of them, that have been working quietly and consistently for 200 years to develop the Black middle class, to develop Black teachers, Black judges, Black lawyers, doctors, dentists, generals. And people are saying, wow, we've got people in our company, but we never realized that they came from this cohort of institutions. I've got a vice president, I've got a director who's really good and competent. I never realized that the school that they went to is a part of a network of similar schools that are also producing people just like the person I'm sharing the C-suite with, just like the person I'm relying on for sales, just like the person I'm relying on for logistics and operations. And so corporations, businesses, industry, and individuals are saying, you know, I want to invest, I want to sow seed, I want to fertilize the growth and development of more people like the people who I'm seeing have led to the transformation in my company, led to us making sales, led to quality teaching in schools, been a great principal and superintendent. And so I think that has recentered HBCUs in the dialogue in a way that we've not seen of late over the last several months.
A lot of young people will say, oh, but it's so expensive, and getting jobs are so difficult, and I'm just going to just stop my education and I'm just going to go work.
Oh,
Dr. Brown, what do you tell those young people?
no,
Because it's expensive to go to college. It's expensive at the university.
it is, but there's good news, and hopefully they read the newspaper yesterday. The graduates from Kentucky State are among, I can't speak for all colleges, but among the lowest in debt nationally.
Wow.
Yeah, it just came out yesterday, the lowest in debt nationally and the lowest in the Commonwealth for tuition-based schools. The only person who has only institution with a lower debt rate in the Commonwealth is Alice Lloyd, which is a work college. So there's no tuition. That said, education in this climate and economy is an investment you cannot afford not to make, right? It is at Kentucky State, we've adopted something called robot-proof education. So we are training people to maximize their skills and competencies at the same time that the economy and the world is digitizing and the computerization of society as we know it, right? The Series, the Watsons of the world. How do we train a graduate? How do we prepare a worker to provide for a school, industry, or business a set of skills and competencies and knowledge bases that cannot be gathered through artificial intelligence? How do we create a worker that is value add to the industry, that they cannot be eliminated as technology takes root? And the reality is everyone now, there were jobs that you were able to get years ago without a high school diploma.
Mhm.
You could have been a trash collector. You could have worked in trash collection without a high school diploma in the 60s and the 70s, maybe even into the 80s and 90s. But now, in 2020, you must have a high school diploma to work trash collection. Because when I grew up, there was a trash uh, collection truck, a big truck with a dump on it, and there was a driver, sometimes a spare driver, and two, often men,
Mhm.
uh, hanging off the back of that truck.
Mhm.
They would jump off and pick up your can, dump your can, and put
Mhm.
your can down. They would do that. It took 4 men
Mhm.
to collect trash. Now there's only one trash collector. Trash collection is computerized, it's mechanized, it's an engineering feat. Your trash can must be turned a certain way. There's a metal bracket in your trash can. The driver has been trained with the right geometry for vectors and spacing to put
Mhm.
that trash collection truck a certain distance, a certain angle from your can to push the button. The arm goes out, the magnet pulls your can in, it dumps it, it returns your can. So 3 people lost jobs in trash collection. There's only one person now. So, and that is what we are seeing throughout. You know, they used to be the question, even when hiring a secretary or a clerical administrative worker, you know, how many words can you type per minute?
Mhm.
You know, can you use a fax machine?
Mhm.
Can you do word processing? Do you do word perfect or word? Right? Now there's an expectation that everyone can do word processing.
Mhm.
Everyone can. They don't offer a typing class in school anymore because you
Right.
everyone is expected to know how to
How to
do it.
do that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so if you are not coming to the workplace with knowledge, skills, and abilities, you're not going to be able to compete because this is amazing. This is amazing. At this moment, we're in a pandemic. We're in a pandemic, and there's manufacturing going on. Yes, there's construction and there's automation going on. But by and large, the world expects people to be in industries. Isn't this amazing?
Yeah.
Where you can work from home.
Right here.
Right here. You right. We didn't ask that we're expecting that you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to work from home, that you have the competencies, that you have the technology. And so if you're not an educated, skilled, and trained worker, whatever the level of certification, you will be left out of this shift. It's a massive shift in society. And so
I'll
we've
tell.
got to make sure that we're tapping our young people and keeping them encouraged. I know it has to be tiring. The mask wearing, the social distancing, the sanitizing your hands,
Mm.
you know, all of this is where you can't go to school, but they have to stay the course and be resilient and strong so that when this is over, they're in position to access what will be a new portfolio of career opportunities.
Well said, Dr. Brown. Well said. Sir, thank you so very much for sharing your time, your expertise. Only thing I'm going to tell you, I miss hearing that KSU band.
Oh my gosh, it is a challenge. What is the great news? Our state is, as any loss of life, any incidence of positivity is one too many. But I believe we're beginning to turn a corner. And so I'm optimistic that some of those things that are endemic to our campus culture will be coming back soon. We've missed them. I feel so bad for our freshmen who are here because they've never seen it. They've never seen the football game. They've never seen the tailgate. They're here, they're taking classes, but there's so much of the informal out of class that they've not had yet.
And they deserve that. And so that's why it's important for all of us to do our part. As the governor says, mask up Kentucky, right?
Yep, wear masks.
There you go. Dr. Brown, thank you so much. And thank you also very much for listening in on our conversation on race about education. And it's not just for Black and Brown communities, but for all communities. Until next time, I'm Dia Davidson.